Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Working Together series, live with our friends at the Netiv Zoom Room with Rabbi Karmi Ingber from Atlanta, Georgia. It's always a joy to have wide open Q&A. If you've got any questions for the rabbi or something that you really need an answer to, feel free to write it down in the chat box, whether on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll try and get that question to the rabbi. So, let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Ingber's doing today, and we'll go from there.
Right. Thank you so much, Dan. All right, good. So, hi, everybody. It's been a few weeks. I haven't seen you all. Good to see you. So, as you probably know, we were busy with the holiday of Passover. And that historically is the time that the Jews came out of Egypt. Very, very crucial time, because that is a time where God revealed himself in the world. Now, you've all heard about the 10 plagues. I don't know if you realize this, but there's an amazing thing they found in archaeology years ago. They found this writing, a hieroglyphic writing in Egypt, that's describing what's happening. This person's writing, there's blood all over, and it's dated literally the time of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. Of course, many archaeologists say, "Oh, it's somebody was writing fiction at the time," which I don't think fiction writing started for many years later. But it's very fascinating that they did find a archaeological find that lines up literally with the 10 plagues as they're happening. So, but understanding what the 10 plagues meant, and you've all heard of the Exodus of Egypt and the 10 plagues. What that was God revealing himself on a grand level, meaning beforehand you had individuals that found God. Now God is changing the way he runs the world to it's an obvious way there is a creator. And that changes everything, because all of a sudden you see. Now, that is the holiday of Passover. Passover is God is giving his calling card, so to speak, to show I created the world, I have complete control over the world, and I'm involved in the world. Those things we see through this process. Now, I want to explain the time we're in right now, because it's a very unique time. This time is called the time of the Omer. Now, what is that? So let me explain this, because even though I'm going to tell this to you in terms of the historical thing that happened, it is a time that is relevant all the time to every one of us. Let's try to understand this. Passover is the holiday of freedom. Now, it's no coincidence that it lines up with the spring. It's not a coincidence, because in the cycle of the year, there's a time where you feel closed up, that's the winter, and a time where you feel free. Passover, therefore, is lined up with the time of spring in the land of Israel, and therefore in the northern hemisphere. And that is now built into the mechanism of this time. There are people do spring cleaning. They want to start anew. The things are blossoming. Passover, we're trapped, we're stuck. God revealed himself and he took us out of Egypt. But now you have to understand what happened and where we are right now. From the time that God took the Jews out of Egypt, what was going to happen? There's a preparation that happened then to the most important thing that ever happened in human history. And what is that? That is 50 days later, after we left Egypt, God brought the entire Jewish nation to Mount Sinai and gave them the 10 commandments, spoke to them. They heard God speak. Now, I want to explain to you a second this concept, how this is different than everything else you've ever heard. Because if you look at every other religion in the world, without an exception, they all start the same way. How do they start? One guy had a vision. He said God spoke to him or something like that, and then he convinces people that this is what happened. And if he's charismatic enough, then at a certain point, he gets followers. I'm only pointing this out because it's modern, and people think things that happened 1,000 years ago. Well, that must be true because it happened 1,000 years ago. It's not true. But if you look at the story of, let's say, Joseph Smith, who was the founder of Mormonism, and he had this vision. He said that this angel named Uranus came to him and gave him these brass, these copper tablets, and he lost them. When he had this explanation, he was chased around America. He was in St. Louis. He ended up getting to Utah, and he got a few people that followed him, and then he created a whole religion about his statement of what happened. Now, when a guy claims that God spoke to him, there's a big problem with that. What's the problem? You can't prove if it's true or not. I don't know. It's subjective. It's not something that a person can go and will be caught with, because you can't really know if he's charismatic or convinced you. If he's not, he's not. There's only one nation that made a different claim, and only one that can, because it's true. The situation that we're talking about is God revealing himself to an entire nation. You can't falsify such a thing. Okay, so for example, let's say you live in you're in Houston. Some of you in Houston, and let's say that everyone says, what happened yesterday? A giant UFO came down Houston, and everyone in the entire city went inside the UFO, and then they came out. So if someone started saying such a story, everyone would say, you're crazy. I know it didn't happen to me. When you want to make a false religion, the way to do it is not to say something that is easily contested. If I tell you what happened to me, you may not be able to argue with that. But if I tell you what happened to you, you'll say it's not true. So I would never do that. Nobody would make a claim that God spoke to you if he didn't do it. It's impossible. As a matter of fact, the Bible itself says that. In Deuteronomy, it says, God said, has there ever been such a thing, or will it ever be, that a nation will come along and say that God spoke to the entire nation? No one would do it. The Jewish people, we learn the Talmud, we're very critical, we argue back and forth, we try to understand the details of what's true. Could you imagine Moses coming along and telling there were about 3 million Jews? We know the army age, there were 603,550 army-aged males. So it's approximately 3 million people. Could you imagine Moshe coming along and saying, okay, here's the book, and it says that God spoke to us, and we all heard it, and it was incredible. It was amazing. People would say, what? You're making it up. It could never be. Even things that, certain historical facts today, nobody here has ever met Aristotle. I think if most people said, did a guy like Aristotle exist? You'd say, yeah. Some things are historical facts. That's a lot less. That's, the people who saw him in Greece and heard about some of his teachings, but you didn't see him. But there's certain things that are known in history. This was an historical event that happened to an entire nation. And if you would build a religion that wasn't true, you would never make that claim. So this moment of what's called the national revelation, when God speaks to the entire nation, is a turning point in history. It is the turning point in history. As a matter of fact, all nations knew it was happening when it was happening. We have a teaching that says there was a prophet at the time, a non-Jewish prophet named Bilam, and the people went to him and said, what is happening? The earth was shaking. There was something going on that they understood. And Bilam said, God is revealing himself to the Jewish people in the desert, giving them the Torah. So that is the idea of leaving Egypt, coming into freedom, was a preparation to go 50 days in the desert to receive the Torah, receive the 10 Commandments, which is not even, the 10 Commandments is a bad English translation. It's really more should be the 10 principles, called Dibros. Dibros are statements, And really, they are the roots of all of the commandments. They're like the principles of all the commandments. So, but it was more than that. It was hearing God speak, which was a transformative moment for the Jewish nation and for the entire world. And it'll always be like that. So I want to understand how important this is. This is a moment where the whole world saw. I want to take a moment to contrast this, because in other religions, like I say, one person will say something and say, I had this vision, and they'll get followers. And then he may even say, I did a miracle and a lot of people saw it. Well, who are these people? Where are they? Can we interview them? No, they left. I don't know who they are. When you have the entire nation and you're saying that every single person had this experience, it would be a very bad idea to make that claim if it wasn't true. And B, you would never get away with it. So the reality is this was the moment, the culmination from leaving Egypt to getting to Mount Sinai, to hearing God speak. And by the way, as you all know, the craziest part is every religion, every religion agrees, pretty much agree to one thing. They all agree that God gave the Jews the Torah Mount Sinai. That's what the Bible says. What do they say happened? But then later on, he changed it. So this one said he changed it here, changed it there. So they all agree on one nexus, one point they all come to, which is that this did happen. So that is the time we're moving to. And now we're in the weeks, the 7 weeks between these 2 points in history, coming out of Egypt when God reveals himself to the culmination where he completely gives over the blueprint and the directions on how to live in this world. Before that, you need to be like Abraham, figure it out yourself. There were small groups of people, that are prophets, but now it's been revealed and everyone knows. I want to explain, ladies and gentlemen, now this period of time. Because what I'm going to tell you now is crucial to understand this time, what we're doing now, but it happens in everything in everyone's lives. Let me explain. We left Egypt. We count 7 weeks, 49 days. The 50th day is the day that God reveals himself on Mount Sinai, as we'll talk more as we get closer to that. Now, let's talk about the number 7. There are 7 days of the week. In our scale, there's 7 notes in the scale. 8th is the octave. 7 is a number that we see a lot in this reality. There's very many deep reasons for that. When you look at a 3-dimensional object, there are called 6 sides to the object. The 7th is called the object itself, what it's there for. The world in this natural form is a world of 7 days, 6 days of work. 7th is the Sabbath, 6 sides of a 3-dimensional object. The 7th is what its purpose, what it is itself. That's the cycle of 7. What we are doing now in these 49 days, 7 times 7, between leaving Egypt and getting to Mount Sinai is the following. When God revealed himself, we weren't on the greatest spiritual level. We were slaves in Egypt, and God in his loving kindness and the promise he made to the forefathers revealed himself and took us out. But in life, the job is not to get a free lunch. The job in life is to earn so you become a competent person, right? I've talked about this many times. People think I know there's a religion that has the idea of grace, but that's a mistake, because if I don't let you earn it because you're nothing, then you'll stay nothing. When you have your 2-year-old kid helping you do the dishes, all you want is the kid doesn't break the dishes, right? The 3-year-old's helping the dishes, they're not helping. They just, please don't break it. When the kid gets older, you want the kid to do something. So the idea here is not that God should give us, because that's great. It's wonderful. The whole purpose of the world is God wanted to give us. But if we remain in the capacity of incompetent people who just are getting, we are not going to feel good about ourselves. We're not going to have the satisfaction of making something. So when we come out of Egypt, that's like the gift. It's like a loan. If a guy gives you a $100,000 loan, and then he comes back in 2 years and says I want my loan back, and the person just wasted the money, that's terrible. What do you want to do? You want to say, here, thank you for $100,000. I made it into $500,000, and here's your money back. I took what you gave me and I built with it. So the experience of coming out of Egypt was this revelation that was amazing. But then afterwards, it changed. And now we need to build ourselves 7 times 7, all of the physical world, all the natural world, try to improve ourselves, that we do it to be able to merit to get to that spiritual level on Mount Sinai where we receive the Torah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the phenomenon of life. It's inspiration and then perspiration. That's what it is. Everything works like that. You'll get all of a sudden an idea, this is really good, or things will happen in your life where something will open up and then it disappears. Even when you see the phenomenon of people falling in love, it's the same thing. It's the great mistake in America why young people have a great challenge in their marriage, because they start out, it felt great, they fell in love, and then what happened? Whoops, I fell out. If you fall in, you can fall out. It's like falling into a ditch. I happened to fall in. You don't fall into love. What happens? What happens is that you get the experience that God shows you. This person is your other half, and you can build something special with them. And then that infatuation moment lasts for however long it lasts, and then it disappears. And then you're supposed to remember what that is and build it ourselves. Then you own it. Then you really own it. That's what it is. That's the experience. And everything works that way. And it's not because God can't give us forever. He can. But he says, I value you. I created you in this world so that you could have real pleasure by earning something. And if I just give it to you, so then you're a robot. We're beggars. We're not. But God gives it to us and shows us what it is. And then he says, okay, now that you know what it is, take the steps you need in life to attain that. That's the time we're in right now. We're going between Passover, when God revealed himself, and then that revelation of the greatest night when we came out of Egypt with the miracles, it kind of disappeared. Now all of a sudden we're back on our own. And how many times do we feel that way? Wow, it felt great. Now I don't know where I'm going. That's not a time to give up. That's a time to say, oh, wow, there's work that I need to do. It's like one of the rabbis gives an example that it's like if you're walking in the dark and you don't know where you're going, it's the dead of night, and you're trying to find this building or this palace, and then there's a lightning flash. So now you know where to go. But what happens after the lightning flash? You're back in the dark. Now you have to go. You've been shown how to get there, but you have to do that. That is what this time is about. It's a time of attaining ourselves. I'll just digress a moment here, because it's they have the people that talk about astrology, and they're usually a little bit not that truthful or that aware, but there is a lot of truth to certain things about the constellations and how God brings his flow down to the world. And those who knew how to read, there are different constellations. So there's 12 tribes of Israel, 12 months of the year, and there's the 12 essential constellations. There is something to it if you know about it. So this month today is the new moon, the Jewish new moon, called the month of Iyar, which in the signs is called the Taurus, the bull. And why is that? Because last month was like the sheep. You follow along, you follow the leader, but then this month you have to go and you have to work like a bull, but putting a yoke on and do it ourselves. The next month which is the month of Sivan, is called in the concept of this part has to be true, is month of Gemini, which is twins. That's when we come close with God and us, because what happens is we have done something to earn it. That is this time. Now, I'll tell you one more piece about this time that you might be aware, may not be aware of. In the Jewish world today, although it was a very, very happy time in the past of the preparation from Passover to getting of the Torah, in the Jewish world today, we do a partial mourning period. We don't trim our beards, different things, don't cut our hair, different partial mourning. The reason for that is there was a great, great rabbi named Rabbi Akiva. And during this period of time, he had 24,000 students and they died. And so to this day, we do a partial mourning during this time. The whole nation does. Now, it's a little funny because I hate to say it, but we've had, 6 million Jews were killed in, the Holocaust 70 years ago. We have the pogroms from Ukraine for thousands of years, and so like 24,000 Jews dying is very terrible. But why is that made into a national mourning time? I don't want to explain this to you because I'll teach you one more principle here. Very important principle. These 24,000 people were meant to be the new leaders of the world. And therefore, when you could become something and you don't, there's an immediate flip side that you have to deal with. So this could have been an amazing time where he would have created the new generation of leaders. And there was a problem, I'll explain to you in a second, the problem that they had, which caused it that it turned from attaining something to the opposite. Let me explain what this means. Whenever you see you could do something very, very big and very, very good, there's also the danger of falling. And that's why you have to be very careful. A lot of times in life, you get to something and it's a big decision, and all these things like sort of come up and these problems come up. You know why it's coming up. And very often the answer is because it's an auspicious moment that if you do this, you could move high, to a higher level. And therefore you gotta be careful, because if you don't, you could fall also. It says these 24,000 people died. And this is, I'm gonna tell you how they died. This is unbelievable. It's very strange. It says they died because they didn't give honor one to the other. That's very strange. Their teacher was the great Rabbi Akiva, who was the most loving person imaginable. How could it be that his students didn't honor one another? It's not possible. I want to tell you something like this. They honored each other in the way, if we saw how they acted to one another, we would be amazed. But there's something else when you interact with someone. You know how sometimes you have family members and you won't talk to a stranger the way you talk to a family member. A stranger, excuse me, I don't want to. A family member, hey, can you, pass the potatoes? What happened? Hey, also you can't say please. What happened here? Because they're familiar. We're very close. These rabbis felt they were so close that they were like one, and that's good, but you still have to go and say another person is a separate entity, and how close I feel to them, I have to give them that type of honor. So it was in their love and connection that they felt like one body, that there was a flaw of being able to, consider them separate enough to honor them in the way they each deserved. So this time between Passover and leave Egypt and getting the Torah is a very powerful time. It's a tremendous energy of moving to greatness. And today, unfortunately, because there was a time where we see that we didn't actually get there, the potential was there and we didn't do it. Today in the Jewish world, there is, as we get closer to getting the holiday of Shavuot, getting Torah, the mourning stops. But during this period of time, there is a somewhat mourning because the 24,000 students of Akiva who were so great and could have gone to this highest level of the great leaders that they should have been, there was a flaw. That's the second lesson I want to teach us today. The second lesson is that every single time you're in a situation in life, it's an opportunity. And if you realize it and you say, this is an opportunity to grow, there's a flip side if you don't. If you don't take an opportunity, then something else happens because you can't stand still. You can't stand still in life. You have to. Everyone is. People tell me they're the same as they were. It's not true. It means they're less than they were, because you can't. You have to move. You got to do, and potential of doing. There's a risk, but that person has to try, has to pray, has the right intention, and then Hashem, God will help us to get there because that's the goal. And that was the first lesson we said today. The first lesson is the whole process in life is giving you an inspiration for the purpose of you taking it and you doing something with it so that you will have attained it and you'll be able to enjoy it fully because you made this good through your own efforts and not just taking from God as a gift without you actually being an active participant to bring out our own personal greatness, which is what God wants. That's my thought for the day. And we will open it up for questions on this and on this time of year and other ideas.
Rabbi, it was really good. I really appreciate it. I mean, sometimes we have to go back and remind people of the basic concepts that really do build our lives, that sometimes we can get so wrapped up in different concepts of religious practice that we forget that we've got to grow. We've got to make sure that we're not the same person. And that illustration that you gave with Rabbi Akiva's students is really a very true statement. I mean, how do we treat people around us that we have familiarity? What does it say? That familiarity breeds contempt? And we've got to treat people with so much loving kindness. That's a good reminder. Anybody have any questions or comments that you would like to bring up? And it doesn't have to be necessarily about this particular topic. It can be something totally.
My 2 points today, I'll just repeat them and give you a moment to think about, and was that the process of the inspiration requires then our response. And it's very, very important. And you understand that because if you take one of the things out, nothing happens. If you don't get inspiration first, how can we build something we didn't make ourselves? And if you just take the inspiration and you don't build it, then you're not here. It was the one idea. The second idea again was the idea that every time of year, so we're in a time of year right now, has different, an auspicious time for certain things. And there's an opportunity to take a step up. And when you take the step up, you have to, because if you don't, then you could, there's always the counterbalance. If you don't go forward, then whatever the opportunity was presented and you don't do it, you could fall backwards. It's very, very crucial to understand those two dynamics in the world. So yeah, let's open it up. Those are the 2 points I want to get across today. And if you have any questions about that, any of the things I mentioned or anything else. Also, what I mentioned today was a very important piece I gave earlier about, I started this with the idea called national revelation, the idea of the difference of what happened and the statement that God gave the 10 Commandments, the Torah, spoke to 3 million people who all heard it, is obviously a qualitative, completely different claim than somebody saying, "Hey, I got a message from God," and you can't. It's irrefutable. You can't do it. You can't argue with him because you don't know what's in his head. But if I'm telling you that we all were there, 3 million people, 3 million Jews had this experience, then if it were not to be true, you would never claim it. and it would never be believable. Also, a very, very important distinction between the holiday we're coming into, the holiday of Shavuot and the getting of the Torah, and how that is a seminal moment for the world that will. That's it. That was a central point that's completely different than anything else that we're ever going to have.
Anybody have a comment or question? Now would be the time. Dan, do we have anybody that's put a question online?
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi,
Rabbi. Hi. Thank you so much for the class. I kind of have a question. I feel like I'm better with writing stuff down, but I'm sure you'll know what I'm asking. So I heard what you said that. So I guess I just kind of wanted you to clarify something that I heard. So are you saying that basically every situation that happens to us in life, it's an opportunity for us to choose to do something, and in the doing something, then that would be the default positive option. But then by not doing something, that's the default sort of negative option. Is that what you're saying? Like
a little yes and no. I hear your question. So what I'm saying is that opportunity situations in our lives are always opportunities. So for example, and we sleep so we don't realize it. Like, so for example,
right,
a couple, I'll say a couple, the couple's married. So you have endless situations that you could do kindness right now. I mean, just like we get up, so we're grumpy, we got our coffee, so if I say to my wife, oh, I'm so happy to see you, you look amazing. So I know I just have done this greatest thing in the world, that I had that opportunity there, but I didn't realize I had the opportunity. So there are moments throughout our lives, throughout our days, we have opportunities to do positive mitzvot, positive things that are expressions of that. So, and there are auspicious times where something might happen that we may have an opportunity to do something. I'm not saying that sometimes the thing you're supposed to do is wait. I'm not saying I wasn't saying that you always have to do it as opposed to not to. I was saying do the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing. Now, what that is a good question, because sometimes, the greatest wisdom is silence. Sometimes people shoot their mouths off and talk, and that's not good. Sometimes
right.
You have to know when to be patient. So I wasn't saying that it's always do or else, if you don't do, that's bad. I'm saying the situations in our lives are opportunities.
Right.
And between Passover and Shavuot is a powerful time. And that's why the leaders of the Jewish people, the students of Rabbi Akiva, had to rise to the occasion, because they had to meet up to what was happening. And when they didn't, it was a negative response, because it was their moment. Okay.
Right. So Rabbi, there's a difference, obviously, between a missed opportunity and a squandered opportunity, right? Obviously.
Yeah. And there's two parts to this. There's two parts. One is I'm saying that really always in our lives, there's opportunities to do things, and and you have to grab those things. Like literally, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, but it's a mitzvah to greet people. The story in the Holocaust that happened, that there was a Jewish man who's had a neighbor that was a German, and the Jewish man, every morning he saw this neighbor before the Holocaust started, and he used to say every morning, he said, "Good morning, Herr Hess. Good morning, Mr. Hess." Every morning, just woke up. "Good morning, Herr Hess." That's what he said every morning. And, it went on for a number of years. Then when the Nazis shipped the Jews out to the concentration camps, so this Jew was online, and the Nazis were, marking down who they were, and they were forcing them to come up and to say who they were, and they kept the very fastidious records. And the Nazis write a name, and he says name, and it was the Jew, and the Nazi was there was his old neighbor. The Jew said, "Good morning, Herr Hess." He said, "Good morning, Mr. Hess." And the Nazi he couldn't make sense of how to deal with this neighbor who acknowledged him every single day and who went out of his way to recognize him and to greet him, but he couldn't do it. And in this story, he actually let him slip away. It's not just true of that. It's not true of what you gain, but that there's an opportunity in every moment to be able to go and to do good things. Recognizing a human being is very important. And I want to explain to you why it's so important. Because I may have a different opinion than you. Let's say a person says to me, this is what the person says, "Hey, listen, you're sitting in a room, I'm really hot, you open the window." So if I say to him, "Listen, I'm kind of cold, and I really rather not." Okay, so what if I ignore him? That means I don't recognize you as a human being.
Right. It's flat out rude.
When I go and I greet somebody, and I see it all the time, it's like I know, like in my synagogue, people always just say, like, I made a point that somebody walked in and made a point to go over and to greet them, because a guy walks in, and people don't notice him. So what message you saying? You're not important. So there are always opportunities to do good things. That's one part. The second part I was saying is that there are auspicious times in life, like between this period of time of Passover and the getting of the Torah, Shavuot. There are auspicious times that you must do something because you're being pushed. You're being pushed to do something. There are individual times where people have a child, or people are young and they're getting married, or people are, whatever it is. But there are moments where you feel that something happening, I have to do something right. And there, we don't want to put our heads in the sand. We want to think, what is the right thing for me to do? And you have to take counsel, and you have to get advice, and you have to pray that you have to do the right thing, and then you're supposed to act upon it. Because if you don't, in those auspicious times, you lost something significant. It was waiting there for you to take. And that's my story about this period of time.
Rabbi, we've got two people with questions. I just want to clarify this. So basically, you're saying that during these auspicious times, and we have several of them a year, that the mitzvahs that you do end up having a greater importance. Like, it seems that they have much more value. Is that what you're saying?
I'll give you an example. There's a time of year called Rosh Hashanah. Mm-hmm. Rosh Hashanah, God judges the whole world. Now, if a person doesn't recognize and relate to that, there's a problem. Why is there a problem? Because like this, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have a friend and you did something to hurt your friend's feelings, but your friend lives in a different state. Okay. So, you should write a letter, you should give him a call, and maybe you should, but he's far away, you're not thinking about it. If the friend comes to knock on your door, and now you don't say, "Hey, I'm sorry for what I did to you," it's much worse. Mm-hmm. He's right there. He's available. So when there is an auspicious time, the state it requires us to rise to the occasion, because if we don't, it's an opportunity. When the opportunity presents that and you don't do it, you're denigrating the opportunity. It's like saying, "Well, I really don't care."
Right. Mary Robbins has a question, then we'll go to Sandy directly after.
Yeah, this is way off topic.
That's okay.
And I never thought about it until you were talking here today. I understand that God spoke at Mount Sinai and everybody heard him. But how did Moses do that? Was it a supernatural? Did he not teach all the people at the same time on many occasions? And if so, how? There weren't PAs that we know of.
So okay, good question. So when Moses taught the people, it was obviously extremely different than the Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai experience was a transcendental experience. It says that their souls were leaving their body. I mean, to hear God speak is not like, it's not like they show in the movies, this British voice and it's very loud. It's not what it is. It was a completely different experience. That was the Mount Sinai, hearing God speak. When Moses taught the Jews the Torah, the way it worked was like this. It was a very specific process. God communicated to Moses. If you look at a Torah scroll, it's fascinating. People don't realize this, but in the Torah scrolls, there are spaces between, let's say, certain paragraphs. Each one of those spaces represents the end of that prophetic communication. So God gave Moses a prophetic communication that was that section, which God told Moses to write down, and then the communication stopped, and that was Moses' prophetic communication. Moses then taught it to Aaron, his brother, then Aaron's sons, then the 70 elders, then the entire people came in and Moses taught them. Then Moses left, Aaron stood up, he taught everyone else. That means his sons, the 70 elders, and the rest of the people. Then afterwards, the sons stood up, they taught, then they left, the 70 elders did, and then the people all reviewed everything that Moses had taught that he got from his communication from God, which is recorded in the Bible. So Moshe's communication to the people, throughout the desert was a much more normative process, which was an organized system of relaying the information God had taught and all the details of what it means, because he understood it totally different because he had a prophecy. And God told him to write it. He taught this over in sections to the people who reviewed it and then studied it. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay, Sandy had a question.
Yes, in regards to taking advantage of every opportunity, I've heard, and then I read again recently, that some people will spend their entire lives earning a place in Olam Haba, and some people can earn it in 1 hour. And I read several examples of people who had done a certain thing, and in one instance, Judah the Prince said that person had earned his place in Olam Haba in 1 hour.
Right.
So should we look at each opportunity that comes our way as this could be my hour and not let it pass, because that could be my hour to earn my place?
It's a very interesting question. What Sandy's referring to is there were some certain fantastic things that happened. There was one story there's numerous stories are recorded. One story was of a Roman executioner who was torturing this rabbi, Hanan ben Tradian. He was torturing him because this rabbi was teaching Torah. And what happened was he was burning him, and he put wet cotton around his chest area, so the fire would torture him and not burn him. His heart would stay pumping while he was being tortured. And then the executioner and then the students were there, and the rabbi was speaking to them, and the rabbi and the students said, different things. And the rabbi said, no, I see the letters exuding shooting up in the air. And the rabbi was in this high conscious, even though he's being tortured. When the executioner saw this, he said, if I remove the cotton wool from your heart and you die faster, will you take me into the world to come with you? And he said, yes. And he removes the cotton wool, and then the rabbi dies, and the executioner jumped into the fire with him. And that was there was a few stories there. Now, obviously, that was a grand moment. I mean, he was executing one of the greatest people ever lived. So that was a very dramatic moment that he had to choose. So we don't know what those moments are. In other words, we have to live our lives like I have an opportunities, and every day I could do something. Every day is valuable. And we have to understand, and this is a very crucial part, is that God wants us with the greatest compassion that we can never even understand to all be successful. So you're always getting opportunities. This guy in your story was an executioner. You know the terrible guy he was? Until that moment, he never even thought it. He was given that opportunity to say, okay, you've messed up until now, you could fix it up within one moment. So we don't know what the moments are, but we know that God is moving it to give us the opportunities for success. And so sometimes it'll be a dramatic situation, like an executioner who's getting a one last chance, because if he wouldn't have turned around then, it would have been over. So he got one last chance to really fix it, and he got it. But if it's better to instead of dying for what's true, it's even better to live for what's true. That you have a lot of opportunities, right? So you could do a lot of good things, So the answer to your question is we don't know. We have to try to maximize our moments and understand that there's a grander plan where sometimes God will give someone an opportunity, like in that case. But that's very hard. If you earn everything in one moment, it's very hard, because in the story I just told you, the executioner, what happened? He had one moment to rethink his entire life. That's why it was so hard, because he lived his life as a Roman, who was a cruel killer or this and that. And then all of a sudden, in 1 second, he had to switch it all. That's why he earned it, because it was that dramatic of a change. So we don't know what the moments are. We got to try to live our lives the best way. And the same God gives us opportunities. If we miss it, he's still always, it's a excuse me. It's a verse. Excuse me. It's a verse. Hold on. It's a verse. It says that God does not want the death of the evil. He waits for them to the last moment. Doesn't want the evil to die, but he wants them to do tshuva, to repent, and he waits for them. So God wants us to get it together. So he pushes us to get us together. But unfortunately, sometimes people are very obstinate and don't do it.
I think one of the fascinating things about Torah and mitzvah is nowhere in the Torah does a mitzvah have an enumeration of reward. So it really leaves it all to a place of us treating every mitzvah as if it's the most important mitzvah, because we don't know. But at the same time, if we have the intent to treat all mitzvah with the highest regard, then that's probably the highest place it could be. That's really good. Sandy, did he answer your question, Eli?
Yes. I was reminded of the other story, if I can just briefly. We probably won't have an opportunity to do what that executioner did and all of that. But the other story I read was a rabbi. I don't remember if it was one of his students or a person that he knew was constantly berating him and talking bad about him and putting him down and everything. And then sometime, and it might have been one of his students, I don't remember, you can correct me, Rabbi, fill in my details here. And then sometime later, that person wrote a book and asked this rabbi to write like an introduction to it. And he did. And he wrote a very nice introduction to the book. And one of his other students said, "Why did you do that? He has spent all this time berating you, and why would you do that?" And he said, "This could have been my hour." So to me, that brings it more down to a level that I might encounter, that just some ordinary thing that I could do something nice. and not get revenge or be petty about something.
Right. 100%. I mean, that's right. You don't know what it is. And it's not, we can't make a calculation about it. Calculation is that I will try to do my best. And I understand that God is looking for our success. And therefore I take those opportunities. 100% right, Sammy. Very, very good. Very good.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, Yaakov, go ahead.
I've been working on my question for a while, so I decided to put it in the chat, and I'll just read it.
Yeah,
By
please.
the way, thanks, Rabbi Karmi, for your teaching. So I feel that the Noahide movement is at an important moment, an auspicious time to step up to the plate. And I actually feel they have a very important role to play in ending the Gula and in everything. But I know that working on the mitzvot and the midot are important on the personal level, but sometimes there are moments when Noahides and Yehudim, Jews can team up. And I just wonder how can we maximize these opportunities and be sure to act on them?
Great. I also agree with you, Jacob. I really, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I do think that this is a very auspicious time. It's interesting. When I just tell you, when I lived in Israel for 20 years, and then when I moved to America, I spoke to a well-known famous rabbi in Israel, Yoel Schwartz, and he told me, he said, "Listen, you need to speak to the Noahides." That's what he told me. He said that it says this is happening, and you need to do it. All right. So I kept my eyes to that. When I got to Atlanta, I came to do outreach mostly to Jews, and it was fascinating. But it switched a lot in the early years, where it was mostly outreach to Jews. Then I ended up doing a lot of conversions, like people who were from different places of the world were starting to come to me, and I ended up I always doing some, but the last few years it was a lot more, and then even more in terms of now Noahides, and even like the idea of and this is right on top of what we just said about good and bad. I mean, the internet on a lot of ways is a horrible thing in many ways. Mm-hmm. Horrible. We're gonna have people telling us what to think and what to believe, and it has a potential of brainwashing, and there are a lot of disgusting things on the internet. On the other hand, there's the possibility that I can reach somebody across the world and tell them about Torah. And so this potential, which always exists in the world, it's a verse in Ecclesiastes. It says, everything God created in the balance with the good and the evil, you have to tilt the scale. So we have now this internet phenomenon where we could reach the entire world and tell them the truth. It's unbelievable. And that's why it's so dangerous on the other side. So what happens is I see this as a progression, because what's happening is in the world is that we know this for sure. I don't know when the Mashiach is going to come, and anyone who tells you he knows is not telling you the correct thing, because we don't know. It's concealed from us. You look at the book of Daniel, you look at all the commentaries, it explains this is concealed. We don't know it. But we do have certain signs that we know are clear. The Talmud says, the greatest sign the Mashiach is close. The greatest sign is one day. The Talmud writes, Talmud was finalized and codified in the year 489, and this is a tradition that went back even much before that. It says the sign you'll know the Mashiach is close is one day the land of Israel will give fruit again.
That's number one.
Yeah. So like, okay, and like if you're bored, today, if you're under 70 years old, you're like, yeah, 70, yeah, for you, sure, Jaffa Orange. But that was an incredibly crazy idea 200 years ago. Who thought of it? But things are happening. Now, when these things happen, the entire world is elevated, the entire world. And that's why I see in my process, There was Jews, there were converts, there were Noachites, because the whole world has to be elevated. That is what's happening. And I'll tell you just a hint of this, because the deeper mystical things are very powerful here. Everything's elevated. The entire universe is elevated. Things, inanimate things are elevated. The world goes through an elevation, and that's the process. And it's so amazing because it's gonna hit on every level. The people who think, unfortunately, many people in the world today separate, their belief in God and science. Their belief in God is fairy tales, and they think science. But these things will, science is always called the flip side of, it's called the external wisdom and the internal wisdom, and they unfold together. And there's going to be, even our communication systems, the theories of understanding. The world is moving towards this, and everyone has to be part of it. So, Jacob, I think it is happening now. How to do it? Right now, we start with learning together. Then next thing is we're gonna, I don't know. Hopefully, Corona is going to be over soon, and this will be we have to have some big festivals in Israel, get people together. And connect humanly also, and interacting that way, learn more Torah. We're involved with the Israeli rabbinate now to try to create, to expand this in a more, it's never been in an organized way. And I'll tell you an amazing thing. I once saw this in one of the great sages of Israel, of Sternbach. I was in Israel, when I used to live in Israel, I found one day a responsa that he had. It was a response to, questions and answers. And someone asked the question to this great sage of how come the Jews do not, teach the non-Jews so much today? Because it says in the prophets, they have to be a light unto nations. Right. And the answer was, he said, listen, yes, that was, but they've been killing us for thousands of years. Right. Kind of can't talk when they're burning you at the stake. You can't really have a conversation. Right. So now that all of a sudden there's a new consciousness in the world where there are people like yourselves that are saying, "Whoa, let's actually hear." Then this light unto nations has to come back and be very significant. So I think that we have to go online. We have to be connecting with the rabbinate to make sure that we can organize this, because I'll be frank with you, there's sometimes there could be charlatans also. You need to be careful, because the rabbis have ways, they understand. Are you trained in Talmud? Are you trained in? So we have to make sure we have it organized, so we protect everyone, that they hear genuine Torah. And that's what we're doing by working with the Israeli rabbinate now to try to create an organized system. And then from there, we have to learn more Torah, spread more Torah, and then connect together in America and other countries, and eventually the land of Israel.
This is why what we're doing is so important today. I mean,
Working
this
together.
very event that, we've already begun the process. Rabbi David Weissman from New York is in the group. He is our teacher on Tuesday nights, but he's taking a respite right now because of his physical health. Rabbi, you have your hand up. Would you like to contribute?
Yes, I wanted to comment on Jacob's question from a little bit of a different angle than Rabbi Ingber. Well, I simply wanted to say he's asking me how could Noahites and Jews actually team up to maximize opportunities, I think, to bring Mashiach or to prepare for that. I think there's one thing we can all agree on, what Chabad and non-Chabad, whatever groups we are within the traditional Orthodox world, and that is praying for Mashiach. Goes back to the beginning, reading what's called the Tikkun Chatzos, which is the prayer, the midnight prayer, mourning the destruction of the temple. And to me, like, we just went through the Passover Seder, and one thing that's really struck out that really really resonated with me was just reading the verses again, speaking about how the children of Israel in Egypt, they were oppressed and suffered, and they cried out to God. And there's various Tzaku, Zaku, various forms of word, different words for it, but they literally cried out. They turned heavenward and they cried out. And we have to, really realize the power of prayer, and I think come together and all pray for the coming of Mashiach in the most sincere way we can. And I think also with that does go the idea of trying to understand the value of the temple and there being a Davidic kingdom, so that the more we appreciate it and the more we realize what's lost, the more we can really cry out in a heartfelt way. So it's worth studying those things in the prophets that discuss what's going to be, or in commentaries that maybe discuss about the meaningfulness of the temple and so on. I mean, the most obvious one really to me that stands out, particularly throughout the book of Leviticus, that each one of us should feel, is that none of these laws of the temple and the sacrifices are being kept. We can't actually do it. And, we've just, as Jews, we've come so accustomed to the exilic life that we don't, half the, it could even be more than half of the Torah we can't keep. And we just yeah, sure, we're fine. Everything is good. We're keeping, we're very from, but we're not keeping half the Torah. And you see that in the prayers too, that, like for instance, today on Rosh Chodesh, on the new month, the prayers discuss the sacrifices and plead with God to bring all the Jewish people back and to rebuild the temple. That's the main thing, rebuild the temple so we can bring the offerings and the sacrifices. Because if we don't do that, then aren't we in a certain way, we'll be held responsible for not carrying it out today, not bringing the offerings because we're not concerned with it, God forbid.
Well, it's
We need to
Rahman
be
Patra,
concerned. Right.
Or
So it's
Rahman
Rahman
Patra,
Patre, but at the same time, it also says that in any person, that any generation which the temple wasn't built as if it was destroyed. But the point is that person should yearn for. I mean, obviously, if half the Torah can't be done, from a technical sense, we're absolved because, quote, we can't. But when a person, like the Rambam says, is in a situation, he can flee from being in the kingdom of an evil Gentile king that forbids Torah observance, and he doesn't flee, then he's held responsible. So, I mean, just as an analogy, it's not the same thing, but if we don't pray, which is our way out, that's our form of fleeing. If we don't try to do what we can, then there's a level of responsibility, and that's exactly why the rabbis instituted in the prayers, particularly on the holidays, which there are these offerings that need to be brought to speak and to beseech God to rebuild the temple. So I think that's something we can all do. We can all be involved with that, and that all of the nations who care, we can pray and with as much heartfeltness as we can to ask God to bring Mashiach, to ask God to rebuild the temple and set things right, and to set our hearts right as well. To purify our hearts, which is obviously the end of all that process, in which all the land will be filled with the knowledge of God.
Right.
You're absolutely spot on, and I think for the rest of the Noahide world that would be watching these videos later, we can encourage them to focus their intention. That's really the point of prayer, is to focus your attention and intent for Mashiach to come. Dan, you have something, and then we'll go to Atalo in Peru.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Rabbi Ingber, based on everything we've been talking about here, what do you think about the idea of building a virtual reality temple? I mean, with things like the Unreal Engine 5, I mean, I could really build an entire 2-scale virtual interactive 3D. It might take a few years, but I mean, it's doable. Where it could be used to Yeah, virtual reality walk in, but have it, monitored in different areas with rabbis to host classes and, set up something with a Cohen and sacrifices. I mean, no problem creating a perfect red heifer in a virtual environment. I mean, yeah, you can guarantee that none of the hairs would be off color. That's for sure. I mean, what's your feeling on that?
I'll answer. I hear your question. So a few things. As was just said before, in terms of there's a need to learn what we want. Like when we say we want to bring Mashiach, we have to say what that means, because sometimes people misunderstand that. The Mashiach is a human being. It's a part of the process. We have to understand what it is that we're talking about. The temple and the idea of offerings is very foreign to people, and we need to really understand the deeper things of what it is. And therefore, there's an educational component to it, to learn about it, which is what even the sages say is like, learning about the offerings is like bringing it, because it becomes a mental approach to understand what it is. And it's a process, because it's very strange for us. We don't really always know, like, I mean, it does not sound right. We have to understand what it is, and part of it you're not going to know until you actually see it and you see what it was. In the temple, there's the first temple, there were 10 miracles that were always happening, that you saw them constantly, and you realize you were in a different dimension, a different reality. So there is a need to learn about it until we're able to actually bring it. Now, actually bringing it, that you can't play around with. You can't do it virtually, because there's a spot in the world, and that spot is the spot where it connects. And there, you go 1 inch away, you're not. There's a spot of the Holy of Holies. That's the point where Abraham brought Isaac. That's the point where the ark stood. That's the point where the world was formed. Whatever it means, that was the center point where the world was created from. So you can't play around with that. To do a virtual temple for a learning experience, that you could do, and that's worthwhile if we do it properly. But it needs to be properly, because just to say you should want to bring offerings, like you're going to have, besides PETA protesting, you have to understand like why these things work and what it is and what it represents. And there's an incredibly, endless amount of knowledge to gain from each thing. So the virtual idea, a virtual temple as a learning thing, that's great.
Yeah, that could work.
If you go to Israel, you can go. It's called they have a place called the Temple Institute, and they have created. They've already built
A model.
the not only the model, but they built many of the vessels according to specification from the book of Yechezkel. They've already built them. They're ready. I mean, I know the woman who she actually made for them the Kohanic clothing when the temple was rebuilt. So there are things to learn, to understand, to prepare, but I think it's crucial to really to as a learning thing.
Right. With the metaverse opening up, I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity where people could actually log in, walk through, with a third person, avatar and interact. The notion is so achievable. It's just take a lot of CG artwork to really pull it off, but it can be done where people could log in from all around the planet, check it out, and if you had rabbis as avatars in certain classrooms or areas, they could literally host classes, and you could have it as a zone destination. I think it would be a wonderful learning dynamic. But being unsure, is it real? Like you say, it has to be at that right spot. I mean, you could recreate it in virtual reality, but it wouldn't be
Right.
wouldn't be
It wouldn't
genuine.
do that, but it could do the component of the educational thing,
Mhm.
which is what we do today. I just to come back to the point that was mentioned earlier, if people come from different backgrounds here. If you speak to a Christian missionaries, one of the first things they always ask is they say, like, it says the atonement and there's no offerings. Where's the atonement? I always ask that. So then they have their next step. But if you read in the prophets say exactly the solution. And it was a prophet that says, that God said, instead of the offerings, now you're going to pay the offerings instead of the heifers to bring offerings. You'll do it with your lips, with your prayers, with your speech. So prayer is in lieu of the offerings. Now, think about that a second. When I would go and bring an offering and I would feel that I'm like bringing myself and I'm connecting to God in the deepest way, and he gives me the vehicles with which I'm going to actually in this world affect a connection. So it was an emotional, spiritual, psychological experience. Now, it's much harder today to go and to say words and to feel all those feelings, but you have that ability. So the idea of understanding what you're saying, meditating on it, with prayer, it's like, it's a very simple thing. When you start to pray, if you take a second, you imagine what you're doing before you do it. I'm speaking to the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
That one split second of preparation for what I'm doing and cognition of what I'm doing the whole thing. And so therefore that's the idea of it. Virtual can be very emotional, it can be psychologically, be educational, and that could be a great intro to, God willing, soon we'll have the temple. Not going to be that long, guys. I can say that for sure. It's
God willing.
The next 200 and something years, because before the year 6,000 it's going to happen. So maybe it'll happen tomorrow, but it's soon. It's not
Soon. Dan, do you have to go right now, or can we take one more question before you go with Atalo?
No, go ahead. I'm good.
One more question.
Okay. Atalo, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Hi. This is a bit off topic. I wanted to ask about the vaccines. And keep in mind, I'm in South America, there's all kinds of vaccines, Chinese vaccines, Russian, you name it. And I heard that the Torah says that everyone should take the vaccine, like a blanket, everybody should take the vaccine instead of a case by case, more of a personal matter. And I'm wondering, how does that work? Like,
that's not true. That's not true.
Right.
Torah does not say you should take the vaccine. It does not say that. What the Torah says is that a person needs to, you have to protect yourself. You can't do things that are dangerous. So there's obviously a great debate in the world. I don't want to get into the particulars of it. Just I'm asking you from a Torah perspective. There's a debate: are the vaccines safe? Are they not safe? There's a debate amongst rabbis too. So you can't say the Torah said take vaccines across the board, because what vaccine? Forget it. Let's take out the corona discussion today, which is obviously so heated that people can't even think and analyze things. But any vaccine that comes out, first of all, it got to be tested. You have to know. So everything is the Torah doesn't say no, take vaccines blindly at all. Not at all. What Torah says is that you need to make the proper effort to protect yourself. Now, if your research and your doctors say, and your understanding of the health situation tells you this is not a safe thing, you should not take it. I'm not talking about what particular vaccine now. I'm saying there's no statement. So whoever said to you that the Torah says you have to take all vaccines, it's not true. It's no such thing. What the Torah says is you you can't go and say, listen, I'm very religious, God takes care, and I'll walk into a leper colony and not worry about it. You can't do that. You can't go and put yourself in danger unnecessarily, because who said you're going to get a miracle? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So therefore you have to do the normal efforts but normal efforts to guard yourself, and then trust. So every vaccine or every disease needs to be decided by, in my understanding, this thing a tested vaccine? Is it a healthy vaccine? What do people say? And then you need to make a decision. Even today, even with these corona vaccines, there are different doctors have different opinions, although I don't want to get into this, because I'll have my name, blasted all over Facebook if I make an opinion here. But believe it or not, there are great doctors who say no. There are doctors say yes. There are rabbis that say no. Rabbis that say yes. You have to figure out what you're talking about, and the Torah says to make the normal efforts to guard your health, and it's not a blanket statement that this is so whoever said it, that's not correct.
Thank you.
You have to do the research. And you have to make your decision based on your research and your understanding, and then you're doing the right thing, especially now. It's a very hard role right now. I mean, whatever people's personal decisions are, this has been a very challenging time because whatever you say, the world got very riled up, and not only that, there is, unfortunately, you can't say it hasn't been politicized. I don't, whatever your politics are, if you don't realize that this has been politicized,
of course
you're not watching what's happening. It's important to watch because people have a lot of agendas and this and that. So you have to look, figure out, and make the decision the best you can on the information that's available. Unfortunately, it's not so much. This is not a simple thing. It's not so much information because it's new and people are saying this. Don't listen to that. But you have the right and the obligation to do your research and speak to the medical people that you trust, to say that if they recommend something to you that you believe that these guys are the ones that will give you the best medical advice, then you say, I'm doing the right thing, that I'm making my effort to protect myself. But you don't have to buy everybody's opinion because, just in Jewish law, it's fascinating, but there's a law about if I have like a lot of doctors and I have against two doctors. So usually you would think you go by a majority, but it's not really true, because we have a rule. If I have, people that are valid witnesses against valid witnesses, just by adding more people, that doesn't make you correct. Right. I'll tell you one thing we know for sure is like this. Every single thing in history, every great discovery in history, before it was made, everybody was wrong. So if you're going to go by what the majority says, that you will probably be wrong, because the earth was flat. The sun did revolve around the earth. So everything that everyone believed until the point where it was proven not, they were wrong. So it's not by numbers. Just by adding people doesn't make it that they have more strength of truth. This thing is not a Torah statement. I can't tell you. I'm not a doctor. I have my own opinions, and I've researched it a lot. I have my own thoughts about it, but which I'll probably tell you privately if you want. But the main thing is to look yourself what you think makes more sense, weigh out the sides, and then you can say that I'm trying to do what God wants by doing the mitzvah of protecting myself according to my best and my understanding.
So that's the mitzvah to protect yourself according to your. That's the mitzvah to protect.
That's the mitzvah. Mitzvah is you have to protect yourself, but there's no statement take every vaccine that everybody says. You have to see if it's a good vaccine or not.
Here in South America, it's very authoritative. It's like you gotta do. Everybody has to do the same thing. And,
well. America's moving to that also, so we got to be careful.
Well, Canada's there already.
Canada's there already, right? I get the sense most people here are, there's an importance to really, because if you're going to follow the majority, and just because people say things, that's not the way to go. The way to go is, and that's what we're all doing here. We're saying, I'm not going to buy into it. I got to look. God gave me a mind. He's encouraging me to find what is true. I'm going to look, and I'll end with this.
And he provided the Torah. Yeah.
He provided the Torah. And I'll end with this story. And I think I told you this before, but Abraham was called Avraham Ivri. Abraham, the Hebrew. But there's another meaning, which is the word Ivri is from Aver, the other side.
The other side.
The other side. Because the whole world said one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world said there are many gods. There's no goodness. It's out of control. Just find your power. And there was one person that said, no, there's one God. He controls everything, and he moves it all towards good. And this one person, Avraham Ivri, Abraham on the other side, fought the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right.
So it's really about a balanced approach of life. Dan, do you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, I could do that anytime. Anytime. Rabbi Ingber, are we on for next week? Aiming for tentative.
Next week, we're back.
All right, we're back. That's great to hear. Now, in the interim you're off, I did contract COVID, and thank Hashem, pulled through it, no problem. So be bold, Italo, do what's right based on the knowledge. I did have to get vaxxed here in my country. It just was mandatory in so many respects. And so the point being, I got carried through it, and I'm thankful. But there was a few days where it's a nasty thing. And sadly,
I mean,
you don't want to be
it's not a joke. It's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke. But worse is you don't want to give it to somebody else, right?
It's a serious look. I don't want to get too political, but already they told me I'm allowed to think this, that when they first came out and they said, okay, there's the largest virus study place in Wuhan, and we know the NIH admitted they were actually doing gain of function research on corona. So maybe it started there. Well, if it did, then it could be a serious thing. Got to be careful.
Well, Rabbi, you got a new fan. Our friend Shirley Ann Lindberg says, "Oh, I like this, Rabbi," and so you got a new fan. She's up here in Canada, near where Rabbi Skobak's at. Wonderful lady, and she's been listening in. Nobody's throwing some serious questions on social media. So, are we going to do the same format for next week? You're going to open up with a topic,
I'll speak a little bit, and then we'll open it up and get to know each other.
Excellent.
Same thing.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to sign off for now. Rod, I'm glad you made it. We were biting our nails at 3 minutes to time,
I was reading.
Yeah, I send you a text. I don't know if you got.
No, I didn't. I was reading. I blamed it all on Sandy, though. I said, Sandy, you didn't tell me the class was starting. I was reading, and I was like, oh, let me check the time. Oh my goodness, it's
all good.
2 minutes after.
It went off all right. And thank you so much, Rabbi Ingber, for sharing with us the beauty of Torah. It's always a joy to be with you and spend time, and it's even more an honor that you open it up to wide open Q&A.
Yeah,
and so
invite your friends to join.
Yeah, and this is why I'm encouraging everybody on the Noahide World Center social media channels and my Noahide Society Canada page. If you've got a question or if something's nagging at you and you need a rabbinical input on the matter, write it down and come back and see us next week, same time. And Rabbi Ingber will be back to join us for more of this Working Together series. It's a joy, Rod. How's everything down in Texas?
Beautiful. Everything's going well.
Awesome.
We can't complain. And how about in Canada?
Well, where I'm at, spring is finally sprung. I mean, we're starting to see 20 Celsius, which is, around the 70-degree mark. So
okay. Well, I went into the pool today, and so it was nice.
Beautiful.
And Atalo, how's things going for you? In
Lima, Peru, aren't they on the different season? They're starting to switch into autumn, aren't they?
We're getting colder now. No more pool for us.
Yeah, we got my friend Zakia down in Lima, Peru. She's just outside of Lima on YouTube as well. And so we hope you guys have a good winter down there while we're cooking up here in the summer.
Absolutely. And we really appreciate we appreciate you coming into class, Atalo. We do. Now, 18127. Who are you and where you are calling from?
Good afternoon. My name is Timothy Ross, and I'm in Indiana.
Okay, Indiana. Are you a part? Were you a part of Steve's group?
I'm not a part of any group.
Okay, well, join
I was
us.
here earlier. but
I know.
something came up with my children, and I had to leave.
Well, I hope,
I
you
missed
consider
everything.
yourself. I hope you consider yourself a permanent part of this great group of students. So until Monday night, which Rabbi Zvi Avner is going to start his second part series on the book of Genesis, and it's going to cover the Sheva Mitzvot from Noah to Abraham. So we're going to have a good time in the next classes. Don't forget them, write them down on the calendar. And until tomorrow, we say
all right.
shalom.
Bye for now, everybody. We'll see you next week.